Windows 8, the OS that is considered as Microsoft's biggest failure, an operating system that was trying to compete with companies like Apple and Google in the tablet business in a very flawed and fractured way. Hardware was poor, and it wasn't an OS that was supposed to run on desktops, but was marketed so. This OS was one of Microsoft's worst mistakes, and to this day they are trying to forget about it. Today, we are going to take a look at Windows 8 and why it was Microsoft's biggest failure. Let's start. To better understand the story of Windows 8, we have to take a look at some history with the OS. Let's rewind back to around 2002 to 2004. Microsoft was working on an OS for a tablet. They had supported tablet computing since the 90s, but tablets were very expensive back then. Take the Samsung PenMaster from 1992. It was a tablet that ran an optimized version of Windows 3.1 called Windows 3.1 for tablet computing, but it was costly at over $5,000. So Microsoft was looking to make tablets more accessible to consumers. When Steve Jobs heard about this, he was very annoyed. He didn't think that Microsoft could make a good tablet, so he brought the task upon himself and his development team at Apple. They developed a tablet that had a capacitive touchscreen, which was different from the resistive screens that existed on the market around that time. They decided to make the device into a phone first, and from that came the iPhone, which is a different topic for a different time. Fast forward to early 2010. Microsoft was enjoying the success of Windows 7, which had been released 2 months earlier and had sold millions of copies. They also were bringing Windows 7 to netbooks through Windows 7 Starter, a $50 copy of Windows 7 which had basic functionality. It was around this time that Apple decided to announce the iPad at a press event on January 27th, 2010.
All of us use laptops and smartphones now. Everybody uses a laptop and or a smartphone. And the question has arisen lately, is there room for a third category of device in the middle? Something that's between a laptop and a smartphone. But we think we've got something that is. And we'd like to show it to you today for the first time. And we call it the iPad.
At first, like everything Apple announced, Microsoft didn't take the product seriously. In fact, no one did at first. It became a running meme in the community and even was criticized for even its name. It was very confusing exactly what the iPad was. By late 2010, however, people started to take the iPad more seriously, including Microsoft. The iPad was selling millions of units and became one of the fastest selling tech products in history. Eventually, Google also started licensing Android to run on tablets and started to sell their own. Microsoft was a sitting duck, however. They decided they needed to make their own tablet device and a tablet OS to go along with it, and cancel the one that was in the works due to its likely high price tag, and the fact that it was going to be running Windows 7, which wasn't tablet optimized. And the tablet was also a dual screen tablet, which explains why it was so expensive. So throughout 2011, as Android was getting more and more competitive and the iPad was getting better and better, Microsoft was developing their own tablet. At an event in June 2011, Microsoft revealed the new OS's design and showcased some other features. Almost 2 years after that, on October 26, 2012, Windows 8 was released.
Let's start off Windows 8, then Times Square.
Windows 8 introduced a more hybrid version of Windows that shared desktop and mobile properties. You had the Start menu redesigned to become a Start Screen, which would be full screen and have large tiles for tapping on. The new interface was nicknamed Metro and featured colorful tiles that sort of resembled a Fisher-Price toy or a set of Lego. Also added was something called a Windows Store. Ported from the Windows Phone, the Windows Store allowed you to install applications on your new Windows tablet. It was very similar in feel to Windows Phone, which is what Microsoft was aiming for, a unified experience. but there were some problems. The first problem with Windows 8 came from the user experience. As this OS was marketed as the successor to Windows 7, people picked up a copy of this OS thinking that it replaced Windows 7 because 8.7, and were shocked when they found that the OS used a touch interface, mostly for tablets, that worked badly on desktops. There were also no start button at all. To get to the start screen, you had to swipe from the right side of the device to reveal the charms bar. This became even jankier on PCs, as the charm bar could only appear when you dragged your cursor over to the right top corner and moved it down. When unlocking your computer, you would have to drag the mouse cursor up to reach the sign-in screen. Windows 8 was just not designed at all for PCs. Okay, so if it was terrible on PCs, what about on tablets? It was much better in there by a lot, but that brought us to our second problem, a lack of hardware. See, Windows is not a very lightweight OS. Android and iOS are both designed for ARM tablets, while Windows is more geared towards more powerful hardware. Just look at the requirements for Windows today, and then look at the requirements for Android and iOS and see which one runs better. As a result, Windows 8 ran poorly on about 85% of tablets it shipped on, since they were all using underpowered CPUs, such as Intel Atoms, to keep it cool. Even Microsoft's own hardware, the Surface, was awful for the first 3 devices. The Surface and RT and Surface 2 were both ARM tablets, which could only run Internet Explorer and a handful of apps on the Windows Store, making them essentially useless and more expensive, say, an Android tablet or an iPad. The third problem was the Windows Store, like I mentioned earlier. When Microsoft was run by Steve Ballmer, they were much more focused on competition than collaboration like they are with Satya Nadella today. As a result, the Windows Store was very limited, missing apps such as YouTube and Hulu, and all the apps that were on iPads and Android tablets. Like I said, there was a few games on Windows 8. From 2012 to 2015, there was Asphalt 8, a couple of Halo titles, GTA San Andreas, Cut the Rope, and maybe a couple of others. There was virtually nothing compared to what Android and iOS could offer. Even Rovio Studios, the developers of Angry Birds, didn't port their game to the Windows Store, even though they had an x86 PC port of the game. Clearly, Microsoft thought Windows 8 could survive on its own, and of course, there was also the fact that the store didn't have a lot of apps that came on similarly priced Android and iOS devices. But what about Windows 8.1? Well, Windows 8.1 was basically a service pack to Windows 8, and featured a few changes such as the start button making a return, and making the OS a tiny bit more click and friendly. But the damage was already done. Microsoft had spent the last 27 years prior trying to establish an open experience for Windows, and when they tried to make it closed, it was an utter failure. In a lot of ways, Windows 10 was able to fix a lot of this. It restored the start menu, even if it was trash and filled with bloat no one needed. It tried to make a more hybrid experience for everyone, and while that approach hasn't worked yet, it definitely still is in progress. And it is much better at Windows 8 in the hybrid section. It's a bit more geared toward desktop users as well. Windows 8 tried to jump on the precedent that iOS and Android had set with a tablet OS that tablets could be successful. This ended up backfiring on Microsoft, and they had to reverse a lot of the damage with Windows 10. And even though Windows 8 really was a failure for the reasons I stated earlier, it actually wasn't all that bad in my opinion. I am making this video from a business standpoint because Windows 8 was a failure from a business standpoint. Personally, I liked the Metro interface. I used Windows 8.1 from July 2019 to November 2020. It really was a great experience for me, and I miss it a lot. I will be brief about my experience with Windows 8.1, but basically I felt it was much faster than Windows 10, less junky with less preloaded applications, and I didn't mind the start screen at all because the bigger start screen really helped me see things better. VMs don't really replicate the original experience, and Windows 8.1 was a lot better when I used it on my laptop. I also don't really like Windows 10 that much, even if Microsoft is making a better effort to try and fix a lot of stuff. The telemetry is ridiculous, and so are the ads. So this is it. Why Windows 8 failed. I really hope you guys liked all my explanation on why Windows 8 was Microsoft's biggest failure, and if you did, you guys know what to do. See you next time.